Hello everybody, it's Linda and I am back to show you how to make a similar album base using envelopes and some cardstock. We are only making the base. The decoration of this album is purely up to you. You can use which papers and embellishments you want. Okay, so this is just to inspire you to use different kinds of envelopes. Use your envelopes in different ways than what you normally do, and give you some ideas on how you can play using the stack the deck binding and envelopes. If you are a beginner and you want to make an envelope album using the stack the deck binding method as I have used here, go to Laura's channel. I will link to her channel below, and I will mark the link as Stack the Deck Binding Tutorial for Beginners. If this is the first album you're going to make, and you have never made a scrapbook album before, because when you have followed her tutorial and it's excellent, then you have got the basics of the stack the deck method, and it will be so much easier for you to understand what I'm talking about and understand what I'm doing. And it will have a variety of spaces between your envelopes, and that's what is different from Laura's method. Laura uses the same size envelope pages and the same size gaps between her pages. Okay, so try that first before you try this. You will have a lot of questions when we're doing this, I'm sure, but I will probably be answering most of them. But you need to be patient. You need to watch the entire film, read my notes on the screen, because if I forget to say something, I'll write it on the screen. So what you'll need to do first is to consider which papers you want to use when you're embellishing your album. Of course, you can make this base without thinking about the papers, but then because I highly recommend that you go around all your envelopes and edge them to match your papers. If you sort of like edge them in black, using, for instance, these kind of papers would not look so good. It's because these are like softer colors and the black would be a bit hard on the edges. So if you're using like nowadays, a lot of you like to use the engraver from Prima, and these papers look great if you edge your envelopes with black. And when I edge my envelopes with black, I don't like to use distress ink because that's too soft of a color, so I love using my paint dabber. And you know, this doesn't mean that I buy huge amounts of paint dabbers. I just refill them with whatever black paint I prefer, as long as it's acrylic. And if it's too thick, I just water it down a bit. So if you're going to edge it black like I did here, you'll need paint dabber preferably, and a black permanent marker. And I love using a marker with a chisel tip, because that maybe you can see that there's a little dent in it here because I've been using it like this. That gives you a lot more control. If the edge of your, or the tip of your pen is round, you will be fiddling about to do this. Okay, so to avoid that and to make it go quick and easy, see if you can just get I'm using a Sharpie, as you can see. So try a chisel tip pen. And if you're going for softer colored papers, then you can use your paint, no, not your paint, I mean your distress ink and your distress ink tool. So for this album, I distressed using gathered twigs. I know a lot of you distress using walnut ink, walnut stain, or photo, what is it called, vintage photo. So choose a color to edge with that match your papers if you prefer edging them. because you need to edge all your envelopes before attaching the hinges and the envelopes to your hinges, okay? That's really important because it's so much easier than getting into all the crevices and stuff after assembling this album, okay? Also, a thing to consider, once you have chosen which paper line you want to use, let's say we want to use this one, and we're choosing to edge with black, then it's time to choose your envelopes. And for this album, you can use any kind of envelopes that you have, any size, any shape, whatever. The only thing that I would like you to consider is, if you're using these papers here, then try and find envelopes that match. That means for this paper line, with all the creams and the browns and the blacks, you can use, and also there are white here, so you can use white envelopes, you can use cream colored envelopes, you can use craft envelopes and black envelopes. So these are colors that most of you probably have already in your stash, and just pick and choose. I also recommend you have some repositionable tape to use when you're going to figure out where you want your envelopes to go and everything. Some scissors. You're going to, any kind of scissors will do, as long as you manage to cut with them, okay? And you're going to need some magnets. The width of the magnets is not important. And to assemble your envelope album, you are going to need some score tape. At least that's what I recommend for you. Score tape or red line tape or any kind of double-sided tape, 0.5 millimeter or 1 millimeter, so that they don't add so much bulk under your designer paper, okay? Because that doesn't look so nice. You're also going to need some acid-free tape to adhere the magnets to your pages. And you're going to need a scoreboard. I've got my messed up Martha Stewart scoreboard. You're going to need a scoring tool and or a bone folder, or you can also use a stylus to fold to score your papers. If you don't have a scoring board, you only need like a ruler and something to score with, and that will be sufficient. So you need this to score your hinges first and foremost. Then you're going to need a paper trimmer. I'm using this because it's really handy and small, and it's a cutter ped, by the way, if some of you wonder. This is to cut your hinges to size and to cut your envelopes to size. Okay, so if you don't have a cutting tool, then you'll need scissors, you'll need a pencil to mark the papers where you want to cut them, and you need a ruler. Okay, so so that you can, for example, if you want to reduce the size of this envelope, you can just mark it and then cut, because that's easier than cutting freehand. Okay, so, and then you can also use a craft knife, of course, instead of scissors if you prefer, but then you need to take care so you don't cut into your craft mat or something. You will also, because we're going to do the stack the deck binding, okay, then you're going to need to use some cardstock. Okay, I am using bazill, and it's craft. Because I'm using craft envelopes, I'm also going to use this craft cardstock. You need good quality cardstock so that it doesn't tear when you score it and fold it. And if you want to, I know Laura Dennison didn't do that in her stack the deck binding tutorial, but you could use tyvek envelopes to strengthen your hinges, and I'm going to try that for the first time with you today. Okay, so I have gathered the envelopes that I'm planning to use for this album, and I've got some 4.5 by 8 and 5/8 inches envelopes. I've got some 4.5 by 6 3/8 inches envelope, some 9 by 6.5 inches, and some 3 by 4.5 inches. Okay, so now let's start puzzling this skeleton together. And I prefer to start with my center spread. So the two middle pages of my album. And I already have an idea of how I want them to be. I want to use 2 of the largest 9 by 6.5 inch envelopes. Of course, you use the envelopes that you have and that you want, because the size that you're going to do them is not important at all. What is important is to decide what kind of a gap you want between your hinges, okay, and between your pages. So I start by folding this over, because then I can use this to create a flap on this side. So I'm folding those. Then I find 2 envelopes that are 4.5 by 8 and 5/8 inches in size, and I want them to go into each pocket like so, and the other one here. And then I want 2 envelopes that are 4.5 by 6 3/8 inches to go here and here. So this is going to be my center spread. And now that I know how I want this to look, it's a good time to edge these envelopes using black. And I'm going to show you how I go about edging my envelopes so that you don't have to watch me do all of this. And it's the same technique for all the envelopes, okay? So if you do choose to edge all your envelopes, the places where you want to go around the edges are, first, if you're using black, use your marker first, so you don't destroy it by going over the wet paint with it after. You will go first. You see, here is the opening, so turn it this way. Go around all of the 4 edges using your pen. Then turn your envelope, flip that down, and then go here and here. So that's where you need to use your marker. It is on all 4 sides here. Then flip it open, bend the flap, and go there and on the edges in the opening, in case they will show. They won't always, but sometimes they will, depending on how you place your designer paper. If you go like close to the edge. Then, if you do black, use your paint dapper. If you decide to use your distress inks, then you just go all the places where I'm using my paint dapper, you would go with your distress inks. Okay, so we start again here. And we go around all 4 sides. Now I've been around all the 4 sides. Then I flip it again. And I go on this side of the flap. And I turn it. And I go here. I do this before I assemble because it's so much easier. And also before I put my designer paper down. It's really difficult once the designer paper is down and the album is assembled. And then around the edges on this side too. So this, and this, not necessary. Okay, so I'll do that with all of my envelopes and then we'll continue. But I want 1/2 inch gap between my pages. I want all my hinges that go inside my envelopes to be 1/4 inch wide. So how do we know where to score? Let me show you. First, we need 1/2 inch gap. We will add 1/4 inch hinge, on each side of the gap, and that will be our first part of the Stack the Deck binding. And that means that our first part has to be 1 inch. That's 1/2 inch plus 1/4 inch plus 1/4 inch. It makes 1 inch. I am drawing this a little bit bigger than it is realistically so that you can see, but the measurements are like this. That gives me, so this is the width of my first part of the Stack the Deck binding. So how tall do I need my cardstock to be to fit my envelopes? Because I want my cardstock to go inside my envelope without having too much of a gap up or down here. I want it to have a snug fit. Okay, I know my largest envelopes is 9 inches tall. So I will cut my cardstock hinge 8 15/16 of an inch tall. Okay, I am using tyvek envelopes to back my hinges to make them stronger. So the first thing that I want to do to make sure that I don't mess this up is to make my first hinge, back it with tyvek, and try to fit it inside my envelope, my largest envelope. If it fits without a problem, then I know my measurement is correct. If it doesn't fit or it's too loose, then I have to adjust it. And I want to make my adjustments before I make all my hinges and stuff. Okay, I don't want to wait. I don't want to make the entire binding hinges thing and then figure out that, oh my God, I made them too long or too short. Okay, so let's make our first part to fit it here. We're going to cut a 1 inch strip of this cardstock. And this is 1 inch just to show. Okay, so don't be confused. So this was just for showing. This is not the actual measurements. Here is my 1 inch strip. So how do I know where to score? I know it from what I've written down here. So I find my scoring board, this, and I place it here. Okay, so I know that I want my first score mark to be a quarter here. So I score at a quarter. I need my second score mark to be here, and there is a 1/2 inch gap between. So I go to the quarter where I scored. I then add 1/2 an inch and I score there to make my other hinge. And then I fold my hinge. And then I'm going to glue the tyvek to my hinge. Here's my tyvek. And this is an envelope. So I'm just cutting it apart. So I'm using the part of the envelope that is not divided by any seam. Okay, this is the back side of the envelope and this is the front side. So you can see this is like a complete sheet of tyvek. And I'm making my first hinge. My first hinge is 1 inch wide. So let me cut a 1 inch strip from this. Okay. And now I want this with the scribbling on to be like the back of my hinge. And before I glue it down, I just want to fold it also the other way because my hinge needs to go both ways like that. Okay. Now we're gluing this down. And as you can see, I have cut the tyvek a little bit longer, but that's so easy to snip off once I've glued it down. Okay, so here is the question that I have for myself. What will work the best? Wet glue or score tape? I am going to try using wet glue. So this is going to be quite interesting for me because I have never done this before. I never backed my hinges. I have used the stack the deck binding without the tyvek backing. So my wet glue is the Scotch Strong Precise Glue. And you can use any glue, any wet glue that you have that you like to use. I like this just because it dries fairly quickly and it's acid free. So now I'll probably make a mess, but who cares? So I'll just add plenty of glue around the edges and in the center. And I'm adding my tyvek strip, and then I'm just pressing out all of the excess glue. And it's a good idea if you're working with dark paper and you're working with wet glues, then keep a little cloth, wet cloth, so that you can dry away the excess glue so it won't leave marks on your dark paper. I'm using craft and it will not show. And also this side is going inside my envelope. So that's my first tyvek hinge. Ta-da! So now, snipping off. Yes. Okay. Whew. And I am now going to fold my hinge again. First I leave it to dry, and then once it's dry, I'll fold it. And of course, the white is going on the back, and the craft is going in the front. So here's my first hinge. So I was talking about the score tape, and this is a great time to add the score tape before you glue this hinge to the next part of the binding. So let's do that. Okay, I said it's really nice if you have one. So you'll need a score tape that's 1/4 inch. You'll attach it so that it does not go all the way down to the score line. Can you see that? Just a little bit above the score line. Okay. All the way down. Then flip and do the exact same thing on the other side. And cut or tear. It is very important to leave your hinge to dry enough before you put on the score tape. Again, make sure that your score tape is not all the way down at the score line. A little bit above is perfect. You turn it and you do it on the other side. And this is what you will do to all your hinge parts of the Stack the Deck binding. So I show this only once, okay? Because it's the same principle for all of your hinges. Just press it well and good. And then you also need some glue or tape down the center here. And for that, fortunately, I have a wider score tape that I can use. If you don't have wider, just make do with what you have, okay? So I'm placing my 1/2 inch score tape in the middle, and it's the same thing. You don't want the tape to overlap your score lines, your fold lines, okay? Leave a little gap there, like this. Snipping off, cleaning the edges here. So this is going inside my album. This has still got craft color. This is the gap between my pages. This is the back. Now that we have finished our first hinge, our first part, we need to figure out how to continue. Here is my center page spread. So this hinge is going to be the gap between these two. So let's see if it will fit inside here. And as you can see, this envelope hasn't got an opening here, and this envelope hasn't either. So we need to cut a tiny, tiny strip from both of these envelopes to be able to fit the hinge inside. And now we'll do that. I cut about 1/16 of an inch, approximately. This is no like rocket science stuff. So you see, it's just a narrow strip that I'm cutting away. That was that side, and here is the other page. So just eyeballing and cutting. I need to cut enough so that the envelope is open, and now it is. And here we are at the fiddly part of this. This is something that takes a bit of time, okay? Because you need to fit it inside here. And as you can see, this fits, even though I have added score tape. It still fits, I think. Doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, so it fits, right? It's not too long. It's not started to go like all crumbly on me. So I need to get this inside here. And how do I do that? I try first to remove the tape, the score tape coverage on one side. Then I place it carefully inside here. And now, how can I make sure that you can see this? I'll lift it up, okay? You need to make sure that the line of this envelope goes not across your score line, because then you cannot flip your page. It needs to go just before your score line. Can you see that? And we try and make sure that happens all the way. And of course, make sure you have extra envelopes, because this fiddly bit here is very, 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 like I say, fiddly. So maybe you will destroy an envelope or two. I always do, okay? I never ever manage to attach all my envelopes without ruining some of them. And now I have, of course, forgotten to do the most important thing that I was talking about. And what is that? It is edging my envelope. Now I have made this really difficult for myself, because I want to edge my envelopes before I attach them to my hinges. So you see, it's really easy to forget. Now that I have forgotten, I will remember. So I'm going to start edging. I want black edges, okay? So let me show you what I do. Fortunately, I have not glued this to the spine of the album or anything, so I can just go like this so that I don't get so much black on my hinge, just on my envelope. And you put as much and as little as suits you. And like I said, I always use my black pen wherever I put it. Here I put it. I place it like this, and I go all the way down here, like so. And this is a nice opportunity for me to show you that I make a lot of mistakes, but you can always correct them, okay? So don't panic. And I don't want this to go into the to the gap between here, but I want it to be on the other side as well. So I'm doing this side. Everywhere that this envelope will show and not be completely covered in paper, I will do this. If you don't want to use black and you just want to use distressings, then use your distressing tool and distress all the edges that you're interested in distressing. And also, I will do this here. It's good to go with your pen first so you don't destroy it with your paints. Okay, so this will be covered with papers, so I don't need to go around there. And anyway, if I should decide that I have to do it, it's much easier because it's on the outer side of the front. It's not into the spine. This is where it's most difficult to go around the edges after assembling. Okay, so I have edged this one. I now need to edge the other one. So as you can see now, all the envelopes are edged, and the large envelopes that form the page is attached to my first hinge, giving me a 1/2 inch gap between the pages. So to keep this all from like falling apart when I continue playing and arranging my pages, I will just stick them down using my repositionable tape that I got from my dear friend Anna. Thank you so much, Anna Zenero1 here on YouTube. Okay, it doesn't matter that it's crooked because this is not the permanent thing. It's just to hold everything in place, okay? So, as you can see now, that's the first part. Then over to the second part. And the first thing we will do is to decide which pages we want to come next so that we know what kind of a gap we need to create our second hinge. So what I want is I just want one simple small envelope, 4.5 by 6 3/8 here, and on the other side of my album I want to use one of the larger envelopes, and that's the 9 by 9 by 6.5 inches. So this is not something that I'm planning to embellish heavily on these pages. So I just, I don't want a 1/2 inch gap between here and here. Okay? I just want a 1/4 inch gap. So that makes my next part of the stack the deck like this. For my second piece of the stack the deck binding, I need to start thinking, okay, the gap of my first hinge was how much? It was 1/2 inch. So I start thinking 1/2 inch. Okay, 1/2 inch gap here. I want to add a gap here between the two pages of a 1/4 inch. I want the same gap on this between those two pages, a 1/4 inch. And then I want the hinge on each side to be a 1/4 inch, because I always want that. So while this one was 1 inch wide, this gives me, for my second hinge, 1/2 inch plus 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. The sum of this is 1 inch and a half. So this is 1.5 inch wide, 1.5. Okay, so when we back our hinges with Tyvek, it's really important to use enough glue, otherwise you end up with gaps here and there and everywhere. So as I said, I'm learning as I go along. We use stack the deck and then Tyvek will show. So that's why you need to paint it to match whatever you're edging your album with. You cannot go over here, I think, and get it really nice using just distress inks. I think you need to paint it in a color that matches the distress ink that you want to use on your envelopes. Okay, so I need to make sure this is done well enough and really leave it to dry. People don't do like me. I'm far too impatient. And if you have a xeron, is that what it's called? Then you can use that, they say. And of course you can use double-sided tape, but that's a bit expensive to me. I don't have xeron either, so I'm using liquid. But when you use liquid glue, make sure it's covered in liquid glue. Maybe Mod Podge is something you can use. I don't know. Like I said, I've never done it before, so maybe if you just like paint the hinge with Mod Podge and then press down, then that will be a good thing. Okay, so I'm leaving this to dry now, being patient. Okay, so I've painted the parts of the tyvek that is close to the score line, because that's what's going to show when I fold my pages, or when I flip my pages. Okay, so for this page I want one of the smaller envelopes, the 4.5 by 6 3/8 inches on this side, and I want one of the large 9 by 6.5 inches on this side. And now I just need to cut the opening here. So I want them to go in the middle of this hinge here. Okay, so that means, and I'm eyeballing things because why? Because I'm not patient enough to do the whole measuring deal. But if you want to do that, you can, of course. And then how do you do this? Well, you cut it down, don't you, to size. And then you need to cut away that end and that end. Now let's see if we're in the middle and there's room for the hinge. No, we're not all done. So let's just go the rest of the way. Yeah, so you can see I just need to cut off a little bit here. And a little bit here. And to make it go inside more easy, I'm just snipping, but not all the way down, because it's nice to have something to hold it in place. But a little here helps a lot. So now it should fit, and if it doesn't, I just need to trim it some more. Let's see. Yeah, fits perfect for me. So again, make sure your envelope does not cross the score line, and try now to remove the tape. Can be nice to use like then it's this one, and this one is almost exactly as wide as the other one. So what you can do is just trim down to match that side, and that should be okay. And now I'm cutting on the score line. Yeah, so now we can attach this center fold to this one. So we peel off the backing here, and now it's all about aiming. So we know this is 1 inch, and if you place it all the way up to the edge on this side and in the center, then you should be able to do the exact thing on the same thing on the opposite side, and it should be good. Okay, so just press down really well, and you have now got a nice little start to your album. Now we're ready to do the third hinge and part of the stack the deck binding. So first we decide how wide we want our gaps, and to do that we need to find which pages we want to go here. And as you can see, this looks kind of crazy, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to cut this or fold it or, you know, play with it later, so I leave it as is. Okay, so which pages do I want to go there? I want big envelopes again, the 9 by 6.5 inch. I want one here, like this, I think. And I want another one here, this way. And I want to attach these little coin envelopes to this flap here. So I want them to go and open this way, and that way, and this way. So now this will open here, this will open here, and this will open on the back here. And I'm going to attach them to this flap where you open and close your envelope. So that will make a fun style pocket thing. Fold it backwards, and I want a smaller 4.5 by 6 3/8. I want that to go in here. If I can manage, like so, to create a flap. So then I've got this flap here, and I've got this flap, and I want it the other way. So this will go this way with the flap here, and over here I've got this. So what I need to do now is to cut the opening here and here on the big envelopes, and then edge all the envelopes. So now I'm done edging all my envelopes, so I will just attach them in the right spots using my repositionable tape. Opening here, opening here. next part of this. So the gap is where I start. Okay, so the gap here is 1 inch, which means 1. Okay, then when I take a look, so I need 1/2 an inch gap between the pages here. So half. I want the same on both sides of the center here. So then the hinge is, as always, 1/4. So when I add all of this, I get 2.5 inch. So my next hinge is going to be 2.5 inch wide. So let me cut. I really need plenty glue to glue this thing down, properly. And I can start figuring out how wide my next set of hinges is going to be. So the gap between this is 2.5 minus 1/4 on this side and 1/4 on that side. So that's 2. The gap is 2. So I start with the 2-inch gap here. And the next, and I look at my album to find what gap I want between the next pages. And I want 1/4 this time. And then for my hinge, as always, 1/4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 times 1/4 is 1 inch. Plus that 2, that leaves me with 3 inch. So my next hinge is going to be 3 inches. And I think I'm going to try my Mod Podging idea. See if that's a better solution. So I'm just going to brush Mod Podge on here and then put on the tyvek. And by the way, if some white sticks out here, does not matter because this is going inside the envelope anyway, so it will not show. my next hinge is here. So we just need to do the tape thing. So now I've put the score tape on both of the hinges and pressing it firmly. So now I need score tape in the middle. So now the score tape is placed in the center, and I have avoided my score lines here and here, and I'm now ready to try and get this inside of these envelopes again. And I'm just, instead of sniffing no, instead of snipping the whole way here, I'm just snipping a tiny piece of the corners. Okay, so now I have to decide what I want to go on my next 2 pages. So for this page here, first I want to use one of the big envelopes, then I want to use one of the smaller ones that will fit inside here, and I want to use one of these longer ones, and that one is 4.5 by 8 5/8 inches, and I want this to fold over here like so, with the opening on this side. So that's that, and you will see this will make a small pocket or flap or whatever on that side. And the opening of the big envelope is up here, so we'll have to cut it away, this little strip there, to attach it to my hinge. On the other side, I want 2 envelopes, and I want one of them to be this way and act as an envelope, and I want the other one to be like this, so that I can use this flap here and make a pocket. Okay, so I'll make a pocket, and I will also open it probably on one of the edges here, so that I can slide tags in and out of the side. So this way it looks like this, and when you flip it over, it looks like this. So I will need first to cut these tiny pieces off here to open the envelopes, to attach them to the hinge, and once that is done, I will need to edge the envelopes. So now I'm going to do that. So to know what to do, where to sort of fold this, I just line it up against. I want this one to be held down with a magnet, so I need some space between this envelope and the edge of this envelope to place my magnet, so fairly close to this edge. Okay, and then if you just hold this, then you can fold here, and once you know that, line it up and just do the rest of the fold like so. And to answer your question, yes, of course, you have to cut it open here. This is hinge and part number 4 of these. This one. So I'm going to start with the bottom one, and I know this is the bottom one because I wanted to create a pocket. So this is going down here. So I start measuring on this end, and I cut it just a slight smaller. Checking I've got my envelope the right way. That's sort of my favorite thing to do, is to turn my envelopes upside down, and I drive myself crazy with it. So I'm trying to check, but I'm not finished yet, so I'm sure I'll do it before this tutorial is over. Okay, let's see, and remember to not cover your hinge. Okay, this should be good. And as you can see on this side, you have a slight overlap. So now that you know that, you can cut it away. You need a little tiny opening so that they will pass each other and open nicely. Okay, so just leave like a millimeter or so in between there. And the other one, we wanted to keep envelope style, right? So for the sake of things, I have managed to cut this on the wrong side. But maybe I will just keep it like that. Or do I really want to put them at this way? No, I don't care. I'll put it this way. So we start here, and when the envelope is open, it should be a little bit easier. So you see, I've got this gap here, and I'll line it up so that I don't cross the score line. This. Okay, so here we go. As you can see, it's quite wide, and of course this can be enough. You know, this will create a great album, but since we are playing with this, I will make it just one bigger. So then we need to figure out how wide our next hinge is going to be. So we'll just start by measuring our spine here, and that is 1, 2.5. So the gap we've got now is 2.5. Can't find my pen, we'll use this one. 2.5 inch. So that's there in the middle here. So because this is now getting quite flat, I don't want my next gap to be so big, so I think I will just make it a quarter on each side here. And then of course the hinge is always a quarter, so 4 quarters gives you 1 inch. 1 inch plus 2.5 is 3.5 inches. Okay, So that's your last. That's number 5 here. Then I just need to cut my cardstock down to 3.5 inches. What I prefer after trying this one. Not so good because you need like full coverage, and that's easier to achieve using a brush and brushing the glue on. Okay, and what I find is that it's always hard to get things to stick up here, so you also need to wait for a while this dries completely, not to mess up your hinge before you start painting the black where the score lines are and refolding. Okay, so back to patience. So the next pages of this album, I just want it to be this small envelope, which is still 4.5 by 6 3/8 of an inch. And I want it to close this way, so I want it to be this way. So that I need to cut it open here and edge it, which I have already done. And for this side, I want these 3 envelopes here. One closing this way, one closing this way, and one closing this way. So that's my pages here on this side. Okay. So that's your skeleton right here. And as you can see, this part here is going to be attached to the spine of your album. I'm not going to show how to make the cover, the album cover, the spine and everything, because that's fairly easy and there are so many great tutorials on it. And also Laura from Following the Paper Trail, in her Stack the Deck binding method, she shows you how to do the cover. So if you need to know how to attach this to your cover, then just go ahead and watch her video. And the only thing that you need to do is to just add like half an inch or so on the top when you want to measure out your cover. So from the bottom and to the top, and plus half an inch to make you able to add embellishments and not having them stick out. And the same, just measure the width of your widest page and add like half an inch to the width as well, so that you make the cover a little bit bigger than the rest of your album. So now I'm going to show you where I want to put magnets in this album. Okay, so that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so now that we have finished our skeleton album base, it is time to put in the magnets. So where do we want magnets? Well, I like most of my pockets to close with magnets. So I will need a magnet here, and then I just pick a magnet. And if you need more information on magnets and where to find them and things like that, I have a tutorial that I have just done. The video before this should be that tutorial. So I'm just placing my magnet. And there. So now probably some of you think I'm crazy because I'm gluing my magnet to this strip, but this is just for showing you, and because there is tape behind here. So I won't remove this until I know which paper I want to cover the inside of this envelope flap with. Okay, but now you can see where I have a magnet. And of course I don't want this to be close to this because this is a separate page, right? But I want this one to close, so I'm going to put another magnet in there. And I can mention that don't put your magnet and your tape especially too close to the edge, because you want to cover this with paper and it won't look so nice, and it will be more difficult to attach your paper if there is like a lot of tape under there. So keep a little bit of distance. Whoops. And let's see. Okay, it's the same thing with this. I have room to attach paper, so that's that. And this I want to be a pocket, so I don't need a magnet here. And these, they can really, oh yeah, haha, something I forgot to show you, but that's because I didn't glue these down yet. Okay, so when I glue these to this flap of this envelope, then I will cut here so that these will move around separately. And then I also want these little ones to close with magnets, so I'm going to put them in, and I want these little magnets. So I can also adhere magnets here. And because I have magnets here, then maybe I will not need to attach a magnet to this envelope. Maybe it's enough that I attach it here to hold it close like this. Okay, so you see, so that saved me one magnet here. But then of course you have to let the magnet find its partner here. You place the tape with the sticky side up and you let it find it again. Then you push it down. Okay. When I place this, I will just cut that and everything. So what is this? I'm doing everything upside down, I think. Or maybe I have just attached this upside down. Yes, I have. Remember I told you I was so proud I hadn't put my envelopes upside down. Well, here I have. So I will probably just make a pocket out of this here. And I might be folding this, but I haven't decided yet. So I'm just leaving this page alone. Here I know I'm going to do a flap thing. And I know I'm going to make my flap here bigger, and I'm going to just use cardstock. Let's see if I can show you, like, for example, like this. Okay, so because of that, I'm not going to attach a magnet here, but I'm going to write myself a note. Magnet to hold flap. That way, I will not just glue my paper down and forget everything about this flap. And it doesn't matter if I write here because I'm going to cover it with paper anyway. So, and if I'm going to, and I have to glue all of these down properly before I start placing my magnets. Otherwise it will be off center and crooked and everything. So let's see now. Repositionable tape is great. You can just rub it off. And we'll use the tape that's already on this envelope to put it in. But I wanted to center it properly like this. Okay. So what will happen is I will cover this with designer paper, and I will use this pocket here, and then this will give me access to the pocket inside of here. Okay, so I also want this flap here like this. So but for this to adhere properly, so it will not like fly around like this, I need to put some double-sided tape here. So let's do that. And it's going to be covered with designer paper afterwards. I have some repositionable tape that I have to just rub off. And let's find the middle before. You see, I didn't put this down because it will just stick so bad. Okay, I think this is the middle. Let's see. Trust me, I always fiddle with my stuff. Okay, there's like no way on earth that I can manage, is there? Let's see here. Okay, like this. Now, and more repositionable tape. So now this whole flap thing is okay. So now I can start thinking about magnets here. And for this, I will need probably one here and one here. I'm going to have photo mats probably inside of this. So let me use a little bit stronger magnets here. Oh, did I say that? Be careful with magnets. Don't let your small kids play with them because they are so freaking dangerous. If you swallow them, they will just try to seek each other out. And if they're inside your intestines, well, you can just imagine. That's not a good idea at all. So careful, guys. Okay. Again, here it's the same thing. I want to make a flap probably or whatever. So magnet for future flap. And this needs to close. If you know that you want sort of to make like you can make this into a flap, right? And just overlap. Here, maybe I will do that. Make large flap. Make large flap and close with magnet just about here. So now hopefully I will know what I mean when I'm going to decorate it, because that can be fun, right? You can make like an accordion flap thing, boom, boom, boom. And what is also fun, you know, we have now made a base out of envelope, but you can like attach new envelopes anywhere, like here, for example. I would not do it like that. I'll do it like this because then it's a photo mat as well. And maybe I will do it this way so that when it opens this way. So what I want you to do is just have fun with this stuff, play with it. And I think it will be a good time to use my favorite liquid glue. So oh yeah, it actually comes something out of it as well. Let's see. What am I doing now? I have to think. Oh, no, I will not do it like this. Of course I won't. Okay, time to remove, because we can do something else entirely. You know, if you have your designer paper and you just cut an opening here to match this, so you can just put this inside, and then you will hide this under your designer paper, right? And of course you need to measure and stuff, right? But that could be fun. So instead of just gluing this down immediately, I will wait and I will glue it down using the designer paper and cutting a slit, and because that hinge will then look very nice. And of course also I then avoid what I was about to do now, and that was to glue down something without edging it. So I will write, remember to edge this. And cut slot in designer paper and slide this part in. and magnet and magnet like this, and then repositionable tape. So that's that one. So what have I got? Oh, I got a flap here as well. So you see, I can do so many fun things. Yay! I can, for example, do this here, right? I can make it like very decorative. Oh, I can't wait to start playing with my papers and stuff. So, for example, if you take a piece of cardstock and you glue it down here, you can draw, or maybe you have cardstock that's already die cut, and you can use it here for a nice flap to cover half of this, and then you can just put down magnets and open and close. You can make pockets. Oh, there are so many fun things to do. So that's why I like this base, and I like working like this. Even though this is so much more structured than what I would normally do. But I mean, the idea, you're getting the idea, okay? I'm just, normally when I work with stuff like this, I do things backwards and forwards and any way possible, make tons of mistakes, but I play and I have fun, and I think it always results, when you have fun, it results in good things, right? So this one, we can glue down. And again, centering it like this, so it opens. This pocket is still available for fun stuff, and I will glue this down. Because that will not destroy my pocket. Like so. And this needs to close here. So here is magnet time again. And it was backwards. Or at least, yeah, it was. Because I was thinking I will have these first. Ah, okay, so I actually, you see, that's what I mean. So this is actually the right way. Oh, how cool is that? Okay, thank you, Linda, for being, yeah, you know what. So that doesn't matter at all. But the placement of the magnets is the same anyway. And now, to help myself, I'm going to write front, up, down. Knowing myself, I should have done this from the beginning, because memory is faded. I did the rest of this album I did yesterday, so this is the day after. And that's enough for me to forget which side is first and last and what's up and down, and so yeah, that's me. And yeah, let me see. You don't need to watch me put magnets in here again. Here I'm not going to do anything, because I'm going to figure out how to do something playful with this little thing here. But here I said I wanted a magnet, and I still do. And I actually think that I was clever enough to put this pretty straight, so it doesn't look crooked. So I can put down the magnet, and I will have it, whoops, pretty close to the edge here. Attach this here like so, and here, and see, Oh, even more pockets, even more fun. So just, play. I hope you learned something from my tutorial, and I hope you had fun watching it. And yeah, I'll see you around, guys. So take care, have fun, and thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you again soon. Bye bye.